Like many of you, I've struggled developing my alternate picking over the years. You know, trying to play fast like guys like Paul Gilbert, Joe Bonamassa, Eric Johnson, maybe even as fast as Sean Lane. And after slowly experimenting with different picking techniques, I found what works best for me. And after teaching hundreds of students all around the world, I've seen some very common problems with many of my students. And many of these problems are super simple, but I think it's why you still struggle and suck at alternate picking. Now, obviously, there's probably an endless amount of reasons that your alternate picking is lagging behind other techniques and you're not achieving your alternate picking goals. But I'm going to cover 5 main ones I see very often, and they're pretty simple, easy fixes that once you become aware of these and start implementing them into your playing and practice, you'll see hopefully very quick, fast results, and your alternate picking will improve in a very short amount of time. All right, the first thing is you are not alternate picking. Now, this sounds silly, but I've seen, actually every student I've ever had has, no matter what level they are, if they're beginner, intermediate, advanced, they knew about alternate picking. They've heard of it before. There's no way in 2024, 2025 that you could play guitar and not have heard about alternate picking. And what I mean is you're not actually alternate picking, is I've seen so many students say, oh yeah, I've been practicing alternate picking for years now, and I'll have them demonstrate something for me using alternate picking. And obviously I closely watch their picking hand, and I notice that, you know, sometimes they'll be perfectly alternate picking, but there's always these weird slip-ups where they throw extra downstrokes, extra upstrokes, and it's not this consistent alternate picking thing. And what it's doing is it's holding them back because they're unaware of that. They're unaware that they're actually not alternate picking and these problems are happening. So when they're trying to build speed, they think they're alternate picking, but these random extra downstrokes or extra upstrokes are slipping in and it's holding them back, and they don't realize that. So when they're hitting their speed kind of ceiling, they're actually not hitting their speed ceiling. They're hitting where that bad habit and where that alternate picking is dissipating, and they're limited by that. Because obviously, if you're only doing downstrokes, you're going to be playing a lot slower than if you're alternate picking. The same thing if you're doing upstrokes consecutively and you're kind of playing. And so the first thing is just be super, super aware. I would recommend grabbing your phone and recording yourself, your picking hand, and watching it back just to make sure you're actually alternate picking, because it's so common. So many people think they're actually alternate picking everything. And when I sit down with them in a lesson, they're actually not. And that's usually a main culprit of why they're not reaching their alternate picking goals as they want. And this often happens in 2 places in my experience with my students, and that's string changes and position shifts on the guitar for whatever reason, especially string changes. So they'll alternate pick all day long on one string, but as soon as it comes time, especially also kind of to refine that, is it usually happens in one direction. So I have many students, they'll alternate pick perfectly ascending, but then they'll shift into descending, and all of a sudden there's problems. So it's sometimes hitting it. So it's sometimes hidden in certain directions of picking. So sometimes your ascending's perfect, you follow it, and you're unaware that when you descend, you're running into these kind of picking problems. So being aware of that, it happens often with string changes, and I find it happens more with descending in particular string changes. But it also can happen with position shifting. Some guys will throw in extra downstrokes. For example, if we take like A minor pentatonic, and we were on the high E or something. I notice a lot of guys, if you're just doing A minor pentatonic, well, and they want to jump up positions, which I highly recommend, like that, they'll kind of stutter a little bit and accidentally either do like 3 downstrokes in a row, like, so they'll be like, or they'll do 2 upstrokes in a row. And then it throws off, if you want to descend the next shape, it throws off the picking completely and really holds them back if they're ever having to move positions. Also, what happens if someone's going to descend pentatonic, let's say, a lot of people slip into economy picking, which economy picking is fantastic. You should work on that as well. But you got to be aware of the easy ability it is to fall into economy picking when you actually don't want to. For example, we do pentatonic, A minor pentatonic. Actually, let's do it up here, E minor pentatonic. Well, let's just do the high E, 15-12 with a down up. A lot of guys that think they're alternate picking, going, down up, down up, down up, down up. They're actually on that B string, they'll go down, up, up. So They'll hit 2, so go down, up, and then they hit the 12 on the B with a down. And now you have to do this weird kind of mechanic of picking where you're changing strings on an upstroke, so you have to change your kind of pick angle, you got to change your pick slant, you got to change all these different things, and it throws off the equation. Instead of keeping it at a downward pick slant and alternate picking, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, it now becomes down, up, down, up, down. You know, as you can imagine, you slow down drastically when you do that. And also you are, you know, if you keep on doing that, you're practicing and muscle memorizing these super very bad habits that's going to hold you back forever. So making sure when you're alternate picking, you're actually alternate picking. Sounds simple, but I promise a lot of guys slip up and they're actually not alternate picking, and it's holding them back from reaching their alternate picking speed goals. All right, number 2, I think everybody's heard this. Using a metronome and making sure you're using a metronome correctly. I've had so many students over the year where I'll have them practice the pentatonic scale, say with 16th notes, so 1 E and 2 E and so 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, and we'll set it at speed at like 80 BPM or something like that, okay? And in the lesson, I make sure they're doing it as best I can, locking in. But obviously, you know, from lesson to lesson, there's a lot of practice time that I don't get to see, and so it's very easy for them to slip up and not be perfectly locked in. So really honing in on those landmark notes where the beat is going to happen. I've seen a lot of students, they'll come in, they're like, oh, I couldn't get past 80 BPM. When I wanted them, I was like, okay, next lesson, I want you at 90, 95 at least, okay? And they're like, oh, I can't do it. I can't do it at 80. I keep messing up. So I haven't pushed the metronome up. And I see what they're doing, and they'll do, you know, say it's a 4 notes per beat, like a 60-note pattern. Well, they're accidentally either just kind of being arrhythmic in a way, where they're completely playing out of time, and they're playing faster than the actual BPM, that's the most common. It's most common where people are playing faster than the metronome, and then they don't realize it, and they think, oh, I'm not good enough because I keep messing up. I'm going to leave it at this BPM. But I get into the lesson, I see them, and I'm like, you're actually much faster than 80 BPM. You're probably at 95, no problem. We just got to make sure you're hitting those landmarks. So if you're doing a 4 note per beat pattern, you really need to find those landmarks to know this note happens on the beat, this one happens on the next one, this happens. And if it's a 3 note per beat pattern, or a triplet, making sure those landmarks are being hit. It's so common that you throw a metronome out, and a lot of guys practice the metronomes, but they're not in time with the metronome at all. And it's holding them back because they think they're not good enough to progress the speed of the metronome, but it's actually them playing too fast. They get too anxious, and they're not locked into the actual timing. Because I promise, you lock into the timing at 16 notes at 80, you push 1 BPM a day, and you're following that, and in 30 days, you'll be up to 110. Most people don't start seeing speed problems until really 150 plus. It's really uncommon for players to hit a speed block. If you're hitting a speed block before then at 16th notes or something like that, it's probably a mechanical thing that's happening. Or maybe you're playing too fast. You're actually playing as if it was at 180, but it's 150. That's what happens often. So make sure you're practicing with a metronome, but make sure you're in time properly and you're hitting those landmarks as you're practicing, and you're not going too fast, you're not going too slow. Most people are going way too fast. So lock in and chill with the metronome and slowly increase the speed every day. Make sure you do not play too fast, and that's going to hold you back. So that's the second reason I find a lot of guitar players still suck at alternate picking. It's because they're not practicing with the metronome properly. All right, before we move on to reason number 3, I want to let you guys know I have a Patreon. It's linked down below. Over there's tons of in-depth guitar lessons covering theory, technique, cool shred licks, patterns, how to improvise, all kinds of different stuff. It's all tabbed out. There's some backing tracks. I'm trying to do even more backing tracks so you can make sure you're practicing these things in context of music. So if you're interested in killer lessons that help improve your playing that you can access at any time, go check out my Patreon. It is linked down below. All right, reason number 3 that you still suck at alternate picking, and that is you need to practice in smaller fragments. You need to practice your speed in smaller groups of notes. A lot of us, we learn all these scale shapes, we learn these patterns. We want to practice them and think we're going to play 1,000,000 miles an hour all up and down the fretboard, and that's what we start practicing. For example, if someone learns the 3 note per string major scale, many times we'll metronome this at triplets or 60-note triplets. So they'll sit down and C major. Right? They'll want to practice that whole thing to a metronome. when it's much better to fragment it out and do maybe 6 note groupings. So, and if you're doing it to a metronome, I highly recommend, if you're doing 60-note triplets, actually play the 7th note and stop there as part of the fragment. So that would be the first notes on the beat, and then the 7th notes on the next beat, and all the notes are in between. So it would be like beat, beat, and just practice that fragment. And then go to the next string and do the same concept. So, and then go to the next string groupings. And then so on. Right? Doing those small groupings is going to help out drastically. And then what you can do, instead of jumping right to the next scale, maybe connect 2 fragments. So you might go, or you might do what Paul Gilbert does, and you go, where you duplicate the pattern, the 6th note. Then go to the next fragment. Like, in the context of most songs and solos, we don't need this long, huge run. I look at these little fragments, little shred fragments of alternate picking, like a drum fill. You might come in on beat 3, but you're going to end by beat 1 of the next measure, right? And so you kind of mathematically fill up that space, right? You might come in on beat 1 and end on beat 1 too, and have a whole measure of a lick, but I wouldn't start off with something like that. You might even start off with a small little fragment that's 1 beat, right? So if you're going like something simple like 16th notes, right? Say it's just this. This is all we're going to do. We're going to fit that into the beat. Da, 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 da. Well, actually, I got a backing track pulled up. Let's pull up the backing track. Let's listen to it. All right, so our shred lick, it's going to be quite slow here. It's going to be just this speed. Right? That doesn't sound fast, but it's fine for right now. That's 16 notes. So we'll kind of throw in a phrase. Say we need to do 16-note triplets for 6 notes. We'll come in on beat 4, say, if we can find that. See, all we have to do to throw it in right there, we just, wait for beat 4. And we were doing a 60-note triplet, so I just played 6 notes, and I wanted to end on beat 1. So make sure to start with smaller fragments. Don't worry about doing these crazy, huge runs like... That's not where we start. We just start by... That's all we need. We can do one little fragment. Practice that fragment before building all these huge scale shapes and patterns. Of course, be thinking of the big picture and how you can use these different patterns all over the fretboard, and you can do these cool, huge runs. But when you're practicing, don't start off with that. You need to start off with these small little bite-sized chunks and try to throw that in. All right, reason number 4 is that you're not pushing yourself because you're scared of being sloppy. This is a big problem I see with a lot of students as well, is we'll start pushing the speed and they'll mess up a note. They won't play it as good. And then they want to constantly restart. And so, if they'll never end up finishing the cool lick, the fast pattern, and they'll also never be pushing it faster on the BPM of the metronome because they're scared of messing up and hitting these sloppy notes. What you got to develop is the ability to accept that you're going to play sloppy. You're trying to push speed. You're trying to get faster than you've been before. You're going to have to mess up sometimes. And the only thing I would say regarding this, as long as you're good at practicing with the metronome and you know where those targets are, the rest will come in. The problem happens when you are throwing a metronome on and you're not actually locked in. You think you're locked in, but you're actually not. Or the problem comes when you think you're alternate picking, but you're actually messing up and you're throwing in extra upstrokes or downstrokes, and you're unaware of it. But as long as you're doing the previous examples correctly and you know how to practice to a metronome very well, you need to allow yourself to be sloppy to keep pushing the metronome. Now, obviously, not completely sloppy where everything is just noise, right? We don't want that. But enough slop on occasion, like say it's a 6-note pattern. If you mess up 1 to 2 notes every couple of times, that's perfect. Keep that speed, maybe even a little faster. You need to be okay with being sloppy so you can keep progressing and pushing your speed forward, just as long as you know exactly what you're playing and you're playing to the metronome properly. All right, number 5, so important. Oh my gosh, this is the most important thing. That's why I saved it for 5 though. It comes in this place because it's very, very important. We don't start off with this, but one of the reasons that you still suck at alternate picking is because you haven't tried contextualizing it in a piece of music. You've just done these kind of abstract exercises and patterns. You've practiced the metronome, you got your speed up, but you're still like, I don't know how to throw it in when I'm improvising or when I'm jamming. I don't know how to do that. Also, you can't expect you to practice these abstract patterns and then all of a sudden it happens and you're playing. It might a little bit, but it's not gonna be perfect. You have to practice and strategize ways to contextualize these fast alternate picking licks. And I kind of demonstrated a little bit earlier, but it's simple things like, putting on a drum track or a metronome and you play like some basic phrase for say a measure and then a half, a measure and a half. And then on beat 3 and 4 of the second measure, that's when you do your lick, right? That's the only time you have, but you have to make sure to end on the next measure. So you do your kind of normal phrase, for example, just something simple. Say the licks, I don't know, say it's this. Right, that's 16-note triplet alternate picking lick. That needs to come in on beat 3, and that bend needs to happen on the downbeat of the next measure. So, I don't have a drum track pulled up right now, but you kind of just mess around for doing basic stuff, super basic stuff for a measure and a half. Wait for it to happen and then go back to doing basic stuff. Right? And then once that's kind of feeling good and you're finding the pocket for that lick, do a different lick and do some different phrases. Maybe move something up here like. So that needs to happen on beat 3 again. So I might be up here, A minor pentatonic, whatever. Say I'm up here. Say I'm up here, A minor pentatonic position 4 here. Basic phrase here. And I want to throw this lick in. Put on a drum track or a metronome, count your beats out. Don't worry about the phrase or anything like that. Just worry about being able to place these licks in that musical context. Then you might want to throw in a backing track and practice throwing these ideas in context like that. Or maybe you want to write your own song and compose your own solo where you use these aspects of placing licks. But eventually what's going to happen once you get a bunch of these licks down and you know how to place them, it's going to come naturally. You're not even have to think about placing them properly. They're going to just naturally place themselves in the music where they need to be. But if you don't practice contextualizing, you can get as fast as you want and you don't know how to play it in context of a solo that you're playing, improvising or composing, whatever it might be. It's going to be almost impossible to put it in your normal playing without. You can do the abstract scales all day long, but that doesn't mean it's in your playing. So you have to practice contextualizing to be able to get these alternate picking ideas into your natural playing where you don't have to worry about and think about anything. You just play them. All right, so I hope this video has helped you out. Alternate picking, it's probably one of the most fun things about guitar. And there's a lot of ways to mess it up and have things hold you back for years and years. So hopefully these 5 reasons have helped you out and you can implement them into your playing today for you can see very, very good progress in your alternate picking in a short amount of time. Now, if there's any other reasons that you think is holding you back with alternate picking or other people back with alternate picking, please let me know down below in the comments to help me out, but also help everyone else who's watched this video out for they can keep on progressing with their alternate picking and reach their goals and be able to play like their favorite guitar players. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys back next time.